My name is Maya Sterling, and for 12 years, I was the silent ghost behind the most prestigious architectural firm in Chicago, Vance and Associate. The associate was me, though my name was never on the letterhead. My husband, Gavin Vance, was the face, the charismatic, handsome genius who graced the covers of Architectural Digest. I was the one who actually pulled the late nights, calculated the wind loads, and designed the breathtaking curves of the buildings that defined the city's skyline. We were the power couple of the industry, or so I thought. The betrayal didn't happen in a dark alley, it happened in a sun-drenched boardroom on the 50th floor. I had just finished the masterwork of my career, the Aurora Tower, a $200 million 80-story glass marvel designed to be the crown jewel of the Chicago riverfront. It was my soul in glass and steel. "Gavin, the final blueprints are done," I said, handing him the digital encrypted drive that morning. "The structural integrity is perfect, except for one minor resonance issue in the crown's glass fins. I need 48 hours to adjust the dampeners, or the wind will create a vibration." Gavin smiled that practiced, charming smile that I used to find comforting. "Don't worry, Maya. You've worked too hard. Take the weekend off. I'll have the junior engineers look at it." I trusted him. I went home to our luxury townhouse. 2 hours later, I received a notification on my phone. Gavin Vance has filed for divorce. 10 minutes after that, a courier arrived at my door with a restraining order, barring me from the Vance and Associate offices. I turned on the news, paralyzed. There was Gavin, standing in front of a sea of reporters and the mayor of Chicago. He was unveiling the Aurora Tower as his solo masterpiece. Behind him stood Elena Thorne, the 24-year-old daughter of the project's lead investor. Gavin didn't just steal my building, he had been having an affair with Elena for a year, and they were using my project as their wedding gift. "This tower represents my singular vision," Gavin told the cameras, holding Elena's hand. "A vision of strength and beauty, built without compromise." He had deleted my access to the servers. He had moved my personal belongings into a storage unit. He had stolen my 12 years of labor, my reputation, and my marriage in a single coordinated strike. He thought I was a discarded blueprint, something he could just fold up and throw away. But Gavin Vance was a face, not an engineer. In his rush to erase me and claim the glory, he forgot the one warning I gave him, the vibration. The structural resonance issue in the crown wasn't just a minor vibration. Without the specific dampeners I hadn't added yet, the glass fins would act like a massive 80-story flute. When the wind hit 35 miles per hour from the north, a certainty in the windy city, the building wouldn't just shake, it would scream. I sat in my empty living room, the divorce papers on the floor, and I made a choice. I wasn't going to sue him for the copyright. That would take years in court while he enjoyed his fame. I was going to let him build it. I was going to let him stand on that podium for the grand opening. And then I was going to let the wind do my talking for me. Gavin's betrayal was surgical. In a single night, he revoked my server access, scrubbed my name from Vance & Associates' digital archives, and replaced me in our bed with Elena Thorne. While I sat in a hollowed-out living room, Gavin was already on site, popping champagne as the foundation for the Aurora was poured. He was convinced I was just a talented wife, a ghost he could exercise while keeping my blueprints. But Gavin made one fatal mistake. He never looked at the physics. He was a master of the pitch, not the math. At the summit of the Aurora, I had designed decorative glass fins, 130-foot blades meant to catch the Chicago sun. In my original plans, these fins required dynamic, tuned mass dampeners, hidden mechanical systems designed to absorb wind vibration. Without them, those glass blades turned into giant tuning forks. "Gavin, did you ever wonder why they call the north wind in Chicago the razor?" I whispered, watching the news as my husband cut the ribbon at the construction site. He didn't know that at wind speeds exceeding 35 miles per hour, the geometry of those fins created an acoustic resonance effect. The building wouldn't just vibrate, it would emit a piercing, maddening, low-frequency whistle that would carry for 3 miles. My revenge didn't require lawyers. It required only time and the weather. I knew Gavin, in a desperate rush to cut costs and impress Elena's father, would trim the unnecessary line items from the budget, and he did. Through my contacts on the site, I confirmed the dampeners were scrapped as redundant design expenses. Gavin wasn't building a symbol of his greatness. He was building the world's most expensive whistle. For the next 8 months, I lived like a phantom. I sold my jewelry and bought a modest apartment with a direct line of sight to the Aurora's construction. Every morning, I drank my coffee watching the steel skeleton of my masterpiece rise into the gray sky. Gavin and Elena became the darlings of the social registries. They gave interviews from our former home, talking about a new vision for modern architecture. Gavin even accepted an Architect of the Year award for the project I had drafted while he slept off cocktail parties. "You look too calm for a woman who's been erased," said Marcus, my only remaining ally and a former safety engineer Gavin fired the day after he dumped me. "Marcus, have you ever seen a reputation collapse because of a sound?" I replied, spreading meteorological maps across my table. "Chicago gets north-moving storms every November. Gavin scheduled the grand opening and gala for November 15th. He wants the whole city to see his triumph from the 81st floor." I showed him the calculations. With a 40-mile-per-hour north wind, the decibel level inside the penthouse will hit 110. It's like standing next to a jet engine. The glass panels will start to sing. At first it'll be haunting, like an organ, but after 10 minutes the frequency becomes unbearable. People will run for the elevators, clawing at their ears. Marcus looked at the blueprints and went pale. "Maya, this will destroy the building's valuation. The units will be unlivable. The investors will sue for hundreds of millions." "Exactly," I smiled. Gavin wanted to own the Aurora alone. Well, he's going to be the only one left to answer for its scream. To keep Gavin off my trail, I needed him to feel untouchable. I sent a formal letter through a third-party mediator, asking for a modest settlement for my years as his assistant, in exchange for a full waiver of any future intellectual property claims. Gavin's reply came within the hour. It was a short, contemptuous email. "Maya, your ambition always exceeded your talent. You were a shadow. Take the $50,000 check and disappear. Elena thinks you're just jealous of our success." He took the bait. He believed I was broken and begging for scraps. He signed the check, and I signed the waiver. It was exactly what I needed. When the building started screaming, he wouldn't be able to blame me for sabotaging the designs. I was officially out of the picture. Meanwhile, construction neared completion. The glass fins were bolted into place. I saw them through my binoculars, beautiful, deadly blades waiting for their wind. Gavin spent the last of the investors' funds on a lavish, glass-walled penthouse, where he planned to host his wedding dinner with Elena on opening night. I began setting my own stage. Through Marcus, I ensured that the opening night guest list included not just politicians, but the nation's top acoustic experts and architectural critics. Gavin promised them a celestial experience. He was going to give them exactly that. On November 14th, the day before the opening, the weather forecast confirmed my play. A massive low-pressure system was sweeping down from Canada. The winds were projected to be north-northwest. Perfect. I put on my best black dress and booked a table at the rooftop bar directly across the street. I was going to watch the building Gavin stole from me drive him right out of the city. The night of November 15th was a masterclass in vanity. The Chicago riverfront was lined with black SUVs and flashing cameras. The Aurora Tower glowed like a beacon of arrogance, its 80 floors of glass shimmering under high-powered spotlights. From my seat at the rooftop bar across the street, I could see the elite of the city entering the lobby. I saw Gavin on the giant outdoor screen, wearing a $5,000 tuxedo, his arm wrapped around Elena Thorne. She was draped in diamonds, looking like the queen of a kingdom she hadn't earned. "Tonight isn't just about a building," Gavin told a reporter, his voice amplified across the plaza. "It's about a new era of engineering. The Aurora is designed to breathe with the city." I took a sip of my wine and glanced at my phone. The wind speeds were climbing, 28 miles per hour, 32 miles per hour. The storm from the north was arriving right on schedule. Arkaza Sekusturin. Inside the 80-floor penthouse, the air was thick with the scent of expensive lilies and Wagyu beef. The guest list was a who's who of American finance. Gavin stood in the center of the room, holding a crystal flute of champagne, preparing to give the speech of his life. "To the future," Gavin announced, raising his glass. "To a structure that defies the elements." At that exact moment, the wind hit 38 miles per hour. It started as a low hum, a haunting, melodic vibration that made the guests look around in curiosity. "Is that music?" Elena whispered, smiling at the investors. But as the wind gusted to 45 miles per hour, the music shifted. The glass fins at the summit began to oscillate. The hum sharpened into a metallic, agonizing drone. It wasn't a song anymore. It was the sound of 1,000 saws cutting through steel. The crystal chandeliers began to vibrate. The wine in the glasses rippled in perfect, terrifying patterns. Then, the first scream happened. A massive gust hit the north face of the tower. The architectural fins acted like a giant reed. A sound so loud and so high-pitched ripped through the penthouse that the servers dropped their trays. People clutched their ears, their faces contorted in sudden sharp pain. "What is that?" the lead investor shouted, his voice barely audible over the screech. "Gavin, shut it off. Turn off the ventilation." It's not the ventilation," Gavin stammered, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. He looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at the dark sky. He knew. For the first time, he realized that the minor resonance issue I had warned him about wasn't minor at all. The sound grew. It became a physical force. On the street level, 3 blocks away, pedestrians stopped in their tracks, looking up at the tower in horror. The Aurora was screaming so loudly it could be heard over the sirens of the city. Inside the gala, the panic was absolute. The sound hit a frequency that triggered a primal fight-or-flight response. Guests weren't just annoyed, they were terrified. They scrambled for the elevators, but the elevators had automatically moved to the ground floor. The building's sensors were registering the extreme vibrations as a structural emergency. Gavin stood frozen in the center of the room. He looked at the acoustic experts I had invited. They weren't running. They were holding up decibel meters and recording the disaster with grim professional fascination. One of them walked up to Gavin, shouting over the deafening roar, "Mr. Vance!" "This is a catastrophic aeroelastic flutter. The resonance is structural. Who signed off on the wind tunnel tests for these fins?" Gavin looked at Elena. Elena looked at her father. Her father, the man who had invested $100 million into this project, looked at Gavin with a gaze that promised a slow, legal execution. I watched from across the street through my binoculars. I saw the lights of the penthouse flickering as the guests fled. I saw the architect of the year standing alone in his stolen kingdom, his hands over his ears, as his masterpiece shrieked his failure to the entire world. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Marcus, who was stationed at the plaza. "The mayor just left. The building inspector is on his way. Gavin is done." "What's the next move?" I smiled, watching the north wind tear through the Aurora. "Next move?" I whispered to the wind. "Now we talk about the fix that he can't afford." By 6 a.m. the next morning, the Aurora Tower was the most infamous building in the world. The screaming skyscraper was trending globally. Viral videos from the gala showed the city's billionaires huddled on the floor, covering their ears while the building shrieked like a dying banshee. The city's Department of Buildings issued an emergency evacuation order. The $200 million masterpiece was declared uninhabitable due to acoustic structural hazard. Gavin didn't go home. He couldn't. Reporters were camped outside his townhouse. He was holed up in a hotel room with Elena and her father, the elder Thorne, who was currently watching his $100 million investment evaporate. I waited until 10 a.m. to make my move. I didn't call Gavin. I called Thorne's office directly. "Mr. Thorne doesn't take calls from former assistants," his secretary snapped. "Tell him I'm the only person on the planet who knows how to make that building stop screaming," I said calmly. "And tell him he has 10 minutes before I call the Chicago Tribune to explain exactly why Gavin Vance ignored the safety warnings." I was in Thorne's private boardroom 30 minutes later. Gavin was there. He looked like he hadn't slept in a decade. His tuxedo was wrinkled, and his eyes were bloodshot. When I walked in, he tried to stand up, his old habit of trying to dominate the room kicking in. "Maya, what the hell did you do?" he hissed. "You sabotaged the code. You did something to the glass." "I did exactly what I told you I'd do, Gavin," I said, sitting at the head of the table. "I gave you a perfect design." "You're the one who decided that safety dampeners were redundant expenses. You signed the change order to save $3 million. I have the paper trail to prove it." Thorne looked at Gavin. The silence in the room was heavier than the wind outside. "Is this true, Gavin?" She's exaggerating," Gavin stammered. "It was a design choice. I thought—" "You didn't think," I interrupted, "because you don't know how." You're a face, Gavin. You're a brand. But the wind doesn't care about your brand." I turned to Thorne. "The city is going to demand the tower be dismantled if it's not fixed. That will cost you another 80 million in years in court. Or you can install the dampeners now." "Then do it!" Thorne barked. "Get your team and fix it." I leaned back and smiled. "Oh, I'm not an employee anymore, remember? Gavin fired me. And I signed a waiver saying I have no future claims or obligations to Vance and Associate." "What do you want, Maya?" Elena asked, her voice trembling. She looked less like a queen now and more like a frightened child. "Three things," I said, sliding a folder across the table. 1. The firm. Gavin Vance is removed from the company. The firm is rebranded as Sterling Architecture. 2. The assets, the townhouse, the offshore accounts, and Gavin's remaining shares in the Aurora are transferred to me as part of a revised divorce settlement. 3. The public record, a press release stating that Gavin Vance retired due to gross technical oversights and that I, Maya Sterling, have been the lead architect and CEO all along. Gavin let out a hysterical laugh. "You're insane! I built that name!" "I won't give you a cent." "Then keep your name," I said, standing up. "And keep your screaming building. By tomorrow, the lawsuits from the gala guests will start hitting. By next week, the bank will foreclose. You'll be the man who built the biggest failure in architectural history. You'll never build a doghouse in this city again." I walked toward the door. I got to 3 before Thorne's voice stopped me. "Gavin," Thorne said, his voice cold as ice. "Sign the papers. Now." "But Elena," Gavin started. "Sign them," Thorne repeated. "Or I'll make sure the investigation into this oversight ends with you in a prison cell for criminal negligence." Gavin's pen scratched against the paper, a sound of total surrender. With that signature, Gavin Vance, the architect of the year, ceased to exist in the professional world. He was no longer a CEO, a husband, or a titan. He was just a man with a mountain of debt and a reputation that smelled like a disaster. As soon as the ink was dry, I stood up and handed the folder to my own legal team. Thorne looked at me, his eyes cold and calculating. "Now, Maya, fix my building. I don't care what it costs." "The fix is already in motion," I said, looking him dead in the eye. "But you should know, Mr. Thorne, I'm not just installing dampeners. I'm redesigning the entire crown. The Aurora will no longer be a monument to a man's ego. It will be a monument to structural truth." Over the next 3 months, I moved into the CEO office that used to be Gavin's. I fired every executive who had helped him erase me. The rebranding was swift. Sterling and Associates. No more ghosts. Gavin tried one last, desperate move. He attempted to sue me for intentional emotional distress, claiming I had known about the defect and stayed silent. He went on a low-tier news circuit, trying to paint himself as a victim of a scorned woman's trap. I was waiting for him. During his live interview on a major Chicago network, I authorized my PR team to leak the black box recordings from the site's internal servers. It wasn't just data. It was a recording of a meeting 3 months before the opening. In the audio, Gavin's voice was clear as day, laughing as he told the engineers to skip the dampeners, because Maya is just being paranoid, and I need that money for the penthouse marble. The public reaction was a nuclear strike. The lawsuit was dropped within hours. The city didn't just hate him, they laughed at him. He became the global poster child for the incompetent man. 6 months later, the wind returned to Chicago. A massive winter gale hitting 60 miles per hour. A crowd gathered at the base of the tower, expecting the scream. Instead, as the wind tore through the new, reinforced steel fins I had designed, the building emitted something entirely different. A deep, harmonic resonance, a sound so low and steady it felt like a heartbeat. The Aurora didn't scream anymore, it breathed. I stood on the balcony of my new penthouse, the one Gavin had planned for his wedding. I was alone, and for the first time in 12 years, I was free. I looked down at the street and saw a man in a tattered coat, looking up at the glowing summit. It was Gavin. He was standing outside the glass doors of his former empire, unable to even pass the security desk, because his face was on every "do not admit" list in the city. I didn't wave. I didn't feel pity. I simply turned my back on the ghost of the past and walked into my brightly lit future. The wind was blowing, but for once everything was perfectly quiet.